they seeing the whole screen?
Just like this.
Okay, they're seeing it like this.
It's okay. Is it the most out of it? So it's on now. Okay, do it.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's pull back together on this one. I'm curious to hear some of the ideas you have about what constitutes a qualified faculty member. But before we do that, there was a question raised about this slide that I have up here, and the question was, will accrediting bodies ask questions related to each of these items? And the answer is no, they won't. What they will ask you is, how did you arrive at your program outcomes? And they will expect you to have an answer that can stand up to peer review scrutiny. And so, for example, I had a faculty member recently put forth a program in energy management. And she did not rely on a number of these. She did get some market research for us to see what other programs are out there and the demand for jobs, etc. She did that work. But her primary method was she did a review of 7 other institutions, higher education institutions, that offer similar programs. And she mapped out their outcomes of the 7 programs, and then she indicated where she would create outcomes for our program. And she also specified for each of those 7 programs the enrollment numbers that were available. So that was a method she employed. You might employ some other methods, but you have to answer the question, how did you arrive at your program to determine that it's viable, and how did you arrive at your program outcomes? You can't answer that question. I woke up one morning and I just had an epiphany for this program, and I wrote the outcomes I think need to happen, need to exist. That probably wouldn't stand the test of scrutiny from reviewers. They need to know that it's grounded in some basis. We have another source for this for us is called the classification of instructional programs. We call them CIP codes, classification of instructional programs. Our government puts out information that classifies instructional programs. And if your programs are consistent with that existing idea, you're more likely to have your accreditation accepted if the program outcomes are also consistent with industry standards. So the CIP codes for us are important. At the end of coming up with a new program, we have to assign a CIP code to our programs for our government technology. So it's a great source of information about programs, and ultimately you have to report to that group about your program. So that's just something. If you're interested in learning more about CIP codes in the United States, all you have to do is classification of instructional programs. It's a great resource for that. Now, there are times when you can come up with a program that's interdisciplinary, and it's innovative, and it's unique, and likely blends 2 or more programs. And I would reference multiple CIP codes to indicate that those categories are in support of your new innovative program, if that makes sense. Okay. Now let me transition to what we're talking about. Qualified faculty. What constitutes a qualified faculty and faculty members, in your view? Let me see if there are any comments from the women on this question. Now, we'll go to the participants in this room then. Do you have comments?
The measure qualification of faculty in our institution by many measures, like number of different degrees, PhD, professor, associate professor, in each specialty,
adapted to the environment. Linkage is with outside world and the body. And third, on different goals, industry experience and professional development, etc.
This table offered us some unique perspectives on additional qualities and characteristics of the faculty member that might enable them to do the kind of work that's done here in the kind probably would turn a lot of learners off. Learners come to the learner contact with heightened expectations around what they would expect from engaging with college professors. Right? And if we have to take into account the learner's needs if we're going to teach effectively. Right? So this idea we're going to revisit much later in class, but it is, to my colleague's comment, an art and a science. Right? So how do we keep current in that art and in the science of learning? We've learned a lot since 1950 about what people can, how people learn, their ways of knowing, the application of knowledge, learning by doing, experiential learning, collaborative learning. There's so much that we've learned in the process that we can apply. Let me take a step back, and so thank you for that contribution. We're going to deep dive into learning and addressing the needs of students later in the week. So today, we're talking about this notion of qualified faculty, part of the equation in the teaching and learning process, just the input part of this, and what accrediting bodies look for when they visit a university on this subject. First, and it's been mentioned already, we're going to be looking at the numbers of faculty members and the continuity of faculty members in a particular college as it relates to a program. So it would be incumbent upon you to report, do we have sufficient number of faculty and a continuity of faculty. Some universities represent that continuity by saying we have X number of full professors who've been here, they're tenured, we have X number of associate professors and assistant professors, and there's a development process that we go through that assures continuity of faculty at our institution as a group. The other thing is an expression of what faculty members should do. What are the roles of faculty members? Believe it or not, they vary across institutions. Some institutions focus more on teaching. Some focus more on research and scholarship productivity. Some focus on a combination of teaching and service, or teaching and scholarship, or teaching and scholarship and service to the institution and outside of it. Depends on your mission, right? Depends on your own mission and mission of the university and college. In my university, we place more of an emphasis on teaching, curriculum development, and scholarship, broadly defined as research, application of knowledge. The scholarship of teaching and learning is also a part of that for us. It is part of what we do, that we engage in assessment scholarship, that we publish in that area in our respective fields, and it's been a unique contribution of our university to the respective fields, that we not only do scholarship in our areas of study, but scholarship in how to teach it. We talked about, so number and continuity, the roles of faculty, it's the second one, second consideration. The third is appropriate qualifications, which we talked about in terms of credentials and publications and citations, and we had a lot of ideas about this, grants. Fourth, evaluate it periodically. All right? Do we evaluate our faculty on some periodic basis? It's not prescribed. It's not saying you have to do this once a year, or twice a year, or 3 times a year, whatever. But that you have on some documented basis a regular evaluation of faculty members. I know that some use that whole faculty progression as a basis for that evaluation. So we evaluate your works to determine whether you go from an assistant professor to an associate professor, etc. That's likely a form of evaluation that you would use. There may be evaluations that include input from student surveys of the faculty member teaching. There's a whole host of ways you can do this. I'm not going to dwell on that now. We're going to talk about that when we get into teaching effectiveness and the assessment of teaching effectiveness. But the criteria evaluated regularly or periodically is important. The fifth, and you mentioned this, are they current in their field? This is something that's really important for the accrediting bodies. They come in and they ask, how do you provide evidence that people are current in their field? There are faculty members at some universities that get in front of class and they have a notebook that is tan. It was originally white, and they lecture from it. They've lectured from it for the last 25 years. Just turn a page and they lecture. The criteria that's employed by the accredited body that I'm part of, they want to know that faculty remain relevant in their fields, so that students experience relevant programs of study. Here's the sixth criteria. This seems rather curious, but they want to make sure that the faculty members are accessible to the learners. It's great to have someone on paper who has all these wonderful qualifications, but if they never get an opportunity to interact with students or they're not accessible, that's a sort of challenge. That's an issue for the accrediting bodies. So published office hours might be a way that you demonstrate that you're accessible to learners, or some other forms of evidence might be present that suggest that faculty members are accessible to learners. After all, we're talking about relations, the relations between faculty and students, and how that cultivates, facilitates the learning community and student learning. Very difficult if faculty members aren't accessible. So we have this idea of qualified faculty, the 6 points. So then the question would be, the final question for this part of the session, it shouldn't take us long to answer this. What are some examples of evidence might you provide to the accrediting bodies on a few of these? I'm not going to go through all 7, but let's take a few. Let's talk about accessibility to students. What might be some examples of evidence you might provide to illustrate that your faculty are accessible to students? Current in their discipline. That's another one. Let's take that one. So we're going to take 2. How do you provide examples of evidence that your faculty members are current in their discipline? Let's take those 2 and give me examples of evidence that you would provide to visitors. Thank you. Let's take about 5 minutes to discuss in groups. We've got 2 criteria. One is that the faculty members are current in their discipline. What examples of evidence can you provide to me that your faculty are current in their discipline? And secondly, that they're accessible to the students. They're accessible to the students.
guys are done?
Okay, let's go back together on this one now. I think, you know, what we're talking about is qualified faculty, and now I'm suggesting to you we have an assurance conversation. Remember, we have these two types of conversations we need to have. One is assurance, and the other is what? You remember? Assurance and advancement. Progress and plans. We have to make sure that when we talk to accrediting bodies, we're dealing with assurance conversations, we're assuring quality, and we're advancing it. So I would say that on an assurance standpoint, the first three of these are pretty easy. Most universities have good discussions, are very comfortable talking about the number and continuity of their faculty. They're good about talking about what the roles of the faculty members are, and they're really good about talking about the qualifications of faculty. Where we have challenges when we go to visit colleges is oftentimes I've seen where universities didn't even have an evaluation system in place for their faculty. I've seen where faculty members are sort of not staying current in their field. But this is a criteria that's important to the commissions. Current in the discipline, and it's great to have qualified faculty, but are they accessible to learners? Because that's what this is about, the teaching and learning process. So, I asked you to tackle two of these. You know, how would you provide examples of evidence? How can you assure me, assurance, that you have faculty who are current in their discipline? What examples of evidence might you provide? Let's go here then. We'll go across the room.
Thank you very much. First of all,
each professor or teacher have to announce his contact of students, such as email, mobile phone, and also in the syllabi should include the info contacts for each syllabus and provided for students. Number 3, to each faculty member should have office hours, and the students could apply and determine a specific time to meet the professor or faculty members. And each subject should have forum for students and professors to discuss everything that's concerning the course. And number 5, decision for each student have a problem. The teachers or faculty members should have a session for each student have a problem. So each academic or social problem for each student. Okay.
I like that forum idea. Actually, because we have an online content learning management system that we employ, regardless of the courses face-to-face or online, and all of the things you mentioned are in it. The syllabus is in there, the contact information for the faculty members in there, means to communicate with the faculty member through video conference technology is available through there. A forum, a discussion board for questions that may not have been covered in class so that learners can seek clarification on issues, and assignments is available so you can publish. And what we find is that sometimes students answer each other questions in the forum. One student may have the answer to the question and they respond before the faculty member does. And then the faculty member just gets on and says, student A is correct. But there is a forum. There is a forum. What didn't he say that perhaps you're practicing, that you want to share with me as examples of evidence that your faculty members are current in their field and that they're accessible to learners? Let's go here.
Actually, what we are saying here is what happened exactly in our colleges.
Okay.
The examples of faculty discipline, evaluation, we have provided evaluation of the course by the staff and the students. The direct feedback from instructors and students, and the annual performance reports for each of these courses. One of my colleagues asked, President car.
President what? His car is on the, that's funny that you say that.
The evidences of accessibility, well-defined website, which is because of the office hours stated in the timetable for each office website, an academic advisory program. We have well-designed academic advisory program, and there's as well providing emails and phone number in the study guide. In faculty of medicine, you have study guide. In faculty of science and mechanical science, we have course 5. The first hour of this course, usually we give students broad lines about the description of the course, and we give the students the contact email and the phone number for the course coordinator.
That's good. There are some, so I like that presence of the car on campus.
Because we have no public transport here.
Yes.
Any service is car.
Yes, that's very, very interesting. So we have some additional suggestions on accessibility of learners. What about this question of faculty being current in their field? Anybody tackle that one?
Just one thought pointing out the communication with the learners, that is Blackboard. If technology is there, then Blackboard is one of the tools that the teacher can use in order to communicate with the students by looking for forums. Another tool might be smartboard or whiteboard. Maybe Google Edu is also another tool to be used in order to communicate with your students. Yes.
The contemporary learning management systems have a way that you can make yourself available to learners at a distance. You don't have to be in the office. You could be somewhere else, but available to learners. And increasingly, these technologies, you can FaceTime them on their phone. There are a lot of ways you can engage with learners, but you have to sort of post means of doing that. What are the available means, your preferred approaches, and the time that you're available to do it. So that's all. And I think we've tackled that in a number of different ways through our discussions. What about the notion of currency of faculty who are current in their field? Anybody discuss that one? And how you might provide me with examples of evidence to satisfy that?
The evidence would be as follows. First, we present the copies of research done by the faculty in the field, which is home field. Copies of the attendance to specialized conferences or courses or presentations we made in the field. As well, copies of last year appraisal of the staff and the new year appraisal of the staff, and showing that he's really developing in his skill. The first appraisal session, compare the previous appraisal with the new appraisal. That's
The document that you're talking about, if you have a section in that evaluation, that periodic evaluation faculty, that says specifically professional development, that will help because it guides my eyes right to that section and I know the criteria is being satisfied. If I have a section in review that says professional development, and they might list conference participation and other kinds of things that they can engage in that are perhaps not easy to spot unless you put it in an organized section like that. So someone who's done company visits, that might be a very powerful way that they are engaged in professional development to go out into the field and see what's going on in that respective area. Or, like you said, conferences attended, participation in planning sessions here at the university, and quality improvement groups would also constitute professional development too. So just having a way for my eyes to go straight to that and see it. And if you can summarize it across the college, that's even better, or across the department, depending on what you're trying to get accredited. It's even better. Committees, right, committee assignments. On the committee assignments on the department level or college level can constitute formal professional development because they're advancing policies and procedures of the institution. Learning about the inner workings of what we do is a sort of aim of that type of work. So, qualified faculty, number and continuity, roles, appropriately qualified, evaluated regularly, current in their field, accessible to students. It's another part of that. And we have the responsibility of providing examples of evidence to assure that. If we were having advancement conversations, our conversation would be about what can we do differently to assure students have greater access to the faculty? What can we do differently to support faculty members being current in their field? Right? How might we improve our ability to do that? Those would be the advancement conversations. With that said, this would be a good time to take a break for breakfast. How about that? Thank you. And we'll come back in 15 minutes. Thank you. It is 10:32. Let's shoot for 10:45. Come back.
I think the important points from the women's side. Let's speak about
Sorry.
to speak about the criteria for academic staff. She mentioned one of the criteria is the response of the staff to the student needs, the ability of the staff to change, or to adapt to the environment, and the curricular activity.
Can we start with you saying this over the microphone?
Yes,
the next
because
review would
she
be
mentioned
okay?
it, she mentioned
Okay,
it.
let's do that. So when we come back, if you can give my attention, we'll say those things that we missed. We'll start there.
I see that most experience to the academy.
experience to the academy?
Yeah.
So, help me understand that. Yes, yes.
You understand me?
I do. A little bit.
Yeah.
So,
You don't speak English very good, but I can
most important.
Test one. كده
ها؟ وقفته؟ لا on there.
لا ممكن تصوت
احنا on there
انا
ولا في البريك؟
لاحظ
خلي البريك مو مشكلة.
انا الان حشغل اللايف جهاز ثاني
الحين شغالين؟ لايف والله اوكي ممتاز.
ممتاز خلاص شوف طيب خلنا في الميكروفون ها طيب
تستنج دكتور ها 1 2 3 تستنج دكتور
This is some noisy Victor, we're trying to reduce it
Oh,
down.
you know what I'm saying? It was, this computer was making a lot of noise.
Wow.
It's not making it right now. Yeah, it was making a lot of
We
noise.
reduce the sound. You turn down the sound?
Its volume's up, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should probably ask them if they still hear it. I don't hear it anymore. It was a
Sure.
loud sound.
Okay. How about now? Is it Victoria? Hello?
دكتورة في صوت عندكم، معلش دكتورة، لأنه طلع عندنا صوت كذا، لأن احنا مشغلين البرودكاستنج اللي على الهواء، فمحتاج لنا شوية يعني نسجل كيف عندكم؟ يا دكتورة في تشويش عندكم؟ تمام؟ دكتورة انت رفعت الصوت الان؟ لا بس هو الاشكاليه هنا خالد، شوف الصوت عندك نويزي؟ مساعد شو في عندك بالله؟
لا في صوت
ما
كده في هذا انت نشوف الصوت هناك في اللايف ليش هنا عايز انا افتش عنه في كلام ده اتكلم كنت
يا جماعة دكتور أتكلم عن الدكتورة، مع دكتورة كيف الصوت عندكم؟ في يعني زلمة يا دكتورة؟ أوكي طيب.
تيست 1 تيست 1 كده بيشتغل. تيست 1 تيست 1 صوت كده عارف كده مش تلفزيون اون نعمل لايف يبقى طوالي اعمل حاجه
اللي هو انك لايف.
لا ده ما ضايف
ايش هذا ربع ساعة؟
دي جايبه الصوت هذا.
This is what we need, right? شفت اللي هنا سبيكر، هل نحتاج سبيكر احنا؟ يكون هون؟
لا
مش هذا سبيكر.
سبيكر ده صغير. لا بس عندك أهم. ليش من هنا؟ This is you shut this down, ماشي؟ Test one.
اليوم قلت كيف السيدات اللي اكثر كثير وكشف في عيني في الارض. طيب حاضر حاضر اذا فيها هرب طيب حاضر.
يعني شو؟ It's on now. طيب.
يا دكتور بهاء تيستينج. دكتور تيستينج. دكتور بهاء. دكتور. دكتور بهاء 1 2 3 4 5 6 testing. We need to start دكتور. لا أنا مع دكتور بهاء دقائق دكتور. دكتور بهاء. Okay, doctor. I think everything is okay. to get started in about 60 seconds. And I plan to start with some of the comments that were made on the ladies' side that were recorded here. So I want to start there just to bring closure to our qualified faculty conversation. So give us about 60 seconds and we'll get started. Because you didn't express the goal or your idea or hypothesis. Any result would be a good result. If that was the case, you didn't express it. Start with the end. Okay, we're going to get started, and we're going to start with some of the comments that were made from the ladies' perspective just before I think we may have had some sound issues, so I'm going to make sure that we covered all the points here. So with the assistance of one of my colleagues here in the room, so if you could repeat what they said in maybe in Arabic and in English, briefly summarize.
Thank you. Yes, this is the point that from women's side about the criteria for qualified academic staff. She mentioned the good academic staff should respond to student needs. This is one. Number two, he should be able to change according to the environment. And she gave an example between, for example, being academic staff in Al-Bahra is different from being in Riyadh, for example. And as well, one of the important criteria is the academic staff should consider or should have activities, extra-curricular activities like voluntary work and other stuff. This is the point raised by the lady from women's side. In Arabic, she speaks about responding to احتياج الطلاب والبيئة، الفرق بين البيئة في البحر مثلا والرياض والقدرة على التغيير بالنسبة للإسباق، وتحدث عن التعليم ليس فقط من وظائف أستاذ الجامعة ليس فقط التعليم والتدريس ونشاطات الخارج الإطار التعليم والتدريس.
I think I may have accounted for these points in my presentation to say that we're going to deep dive into the learner requirements, but I would agree with the point that she made that part of what we have to demonstrate is how we not only remain current in our field, but how we adapt to the needs of the learners and the changes in their particular needs. And that might change based on the environment we're teaching in, but also over time as learners encounter and come to be familiar with new technologies. How are we leveraging some of the technologies that help them support learning? How do we deal with levels of readiness and preparedness of our students? Some of that may be extracurricular activity that we support, like learning centers or field experiences, etc. So I do think that's going to be addressed when we talk more about the learning aspects of this equation, more so than the faculty qualification side of it. There is a relationship between the two, because as we come to utilize the tools differently and come to address the learner's needs, we really are improving our own qualifications to do that work. So they do go hand in hand in many ways. So we've talked about degree programs that are, this is the context, degree programs that are appropriate to higher education, and one indicator of that would be a qualified faculty. All right? What I've shared with you that's up here on the monitor on the screen has to do with another way that we assure that degree programs are appropriate to higher education. And that is that we work to make sure that the programs are current and relevant, and that there are multiple sources of that currency and relevancy. It could be the external standards and criteria that are likely to change in a respective field. If you take, for example, accounting. Accounting at our university has undergone some changes pretty recently around international accounting standards. And we've had to take those standards and incorporate them into our curriculum. And we have to make sure that our faculty members are current regarding those standards. So they participated in professional conferences where they discuss these standards, in webinars where they discuss these standards, and they incorporate them into the curriculum. I've also had a chance to send faculty members to other locations to teach with faculty members who have already adopted the international accounting standards. My colleagues in Poland, for example, they already adopted the standards, so I sent the American faculty out there to work with them to develop the curriculum and to get advice and counsel from the Polish faculty members who were already employing these standards in Europe. So that's just an example. But you can imagine some fields undergo change more rapidly than others. I think we talked about this on day one with computer science. That's a field that undergoes quite a bit of change in terms of the technology, the hardware, the software that people use. And we cannot prepare people fast enough to deal with cybersecurity as a subject area. That's something that undergoes change quite rapidly as well. So we have to demonstrate not only currency of our faculty, but currency of our curriculum, currency and relevancy. And there may be a lot of ways that you employ to assure that. What my institution does is we look at market data, we connect with advisory boards, we look at the standards and criteria of a field profession that changes. Sometimes the laws change that affect the profession. And so keeping in touch with your profession is a really important objective. And we would look for you to provide examples of evidence of that as we come to visit the campus if I were a reviewer. Let's move ahead. Another aspect of our systems view is looking at what happens after a course is offered that could lead to its improvement. And we'll talk about this from the standpoint of design to assure that our courses and programs are relevant. We hear from faculty, we hear from students, we conduct surveys of alumni, we engage alumni in their insights about what's really happening in the field. Did you feel prepared for that? And we get feedback from them. We'll talk about specific kinds of feedback surveys and items you might ask alumni if you encountered them to give you information about improvements to your programs and courses. We're going to do that later in the week. We're going to deep dive into that section as well. And then peer review processes, engaging your own colleagues who would visit your university through the accreditation process or quality assurance process is a very helpful way to assure that you have appropriate degrees and that they're relevant and current. here's a subject that I think that we don't talk enough about, and it's what expectations do we put on learners? Because the criteria for the criteria for accreditation is this. In satisfying this question of whether degree programs are appropriate to higher education, do you require the level of performance of your students that are appropriate to the degree level? Level of performance of your students is appropriate to the degree level. So let's take this for a moment. We talked about outcomes being the differentiator for this question. It's a differentiator for high school to college, but it's also a differentiator for bachelor's to master's degrees, or master's degrees to doctoral degrees. So I have an activity that I was hoping to engage in with. That there's a sheet on your table. It's in English, and it specifies 3 sets of program outcomes. I can even put it up on the board as well. There's a sheet that specifies 3 levels of program outcomes. Let me ask the women, do you have this sheet in your room?
Yes, we have.
Great, thank you so much. What I would like for you to do in your discussion groups is match each set of outcomes to the degree level. Now I recognize that you don't have maybe you don't have associate degrees, but these are 2-year degrees. We have 2-year degrees, which are called associate degrees. We have 4-year degrees, which are bachelor's degrees. And then you go back to school again for another 1 to 2 years for a master's degree. So if you were to order these in terms of their complexity, what order would you put them in? Associate degree is the lowest, bachelor's is the middle, master's is the highest. These are all for business programs. I should have probably not told you that.
Is that matching?
Matching. It's a matching activity. Okay. Match the outcomes to the right degree level. Okay, let's pull back together on this one. Hopefully you had enough time to discuss it. You know, it's interesting, there was some disagreement on this one, and there's good discussion about it. But I hope it gives you a basis for going back in and examining your outcomes, because they have to be differentiated in a way that clearly indicates the level of education in a particular field. It's also true that they have to be different from other degrees and degree programs. And as I mentioned yesterday, I've had the experience where if I put my hand over the title of the degree program, I couldn't tell you which program those outcomes belong to. So they have to have some contextual elements to it. So we have this idea that outcomes have to be expressed in a certain way. And one of my colleagues here in the room talked about the use of Bloom's taxonomy as a way to differentiate higher order thinking, higher order problem solving, and activities and behaviors at a higher order emotional or affective domain areas, but there are higher order that are implied through this taxonomy that Bloom provides. And we'll actually review Bloom's taxonomy when we get into course outcomes, because I think it's important that you have some mastery of outcomes language, if you're going to design exceptional curriculum. I mean, some of you are designing exceptional curriculum, you have some general sense of this, but the question is, are these outcomes ones that are portable across institutions, right? And if a peer review group comes in and they read them, would they conclude that the outcomes are expressed for the discipline and at the right level? That's where we're headed with this. So I gave you a challenge. I gave you a set of 3 learning outcomes by program. They're real and they're on my website. I can show them to you. So I didn't make this up. And your task was to match the set of program outcomes to the right degree level. Now, for program outcomes number 1, which degree level did you assign them to? Associate. Anybody disagree with that? It's sort of pretty, yes. Pardon me? The third outcome under 1.
As building an error-free argument is not an easy thing. So point is 3. Under program outcome 1, I believe it belongs to bachelor degree plus master's degree.
We have this expectation of all higher education institutions. If you recall that I said at the beginning that every program of study should engage learners in collecting, analyzing, and communicating information. Right? That was one of the criteria that the accrediting bodies look at to sort of a basic standard for accreditation. And your degree programs have that. And you actually pointed out that communication objective at the associate degree level. Write and present error-free arguments for an internal business audience. That one comes probably straight from the degree profile for associate degrees. It's something very similar to that. In fact, if the word business wasn't in there, you could probably replace it for medical audiences or for some other audience, but it's at for our purposes, it has been expressed at an associate degree. Let me contrast that one to, before I do that, let me come back to this one. I'm going to come back to this one. Let me ask you first, we have the program outcomes number 2. Where did you situate that one? Masters? Anybody disagree with that one? Masters. That's right. Program outcomes number 2 are in the master's degree category. Okay? Because you're really talking about broader strategic issues, very complex systems, multiple cultures. You have verbs like create, integrate, and initiate not only tactical operation, but strategic decision making, right? You have design, which is a very high order outcome. Design and execute a solution for problems using multifaceted business approaches. That's socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable. That's a pretty big objective as a practitioner. And then deconstruct and reformulate in context to the theory in practical perspectives, right? That is pretty broad. If you look down at program outcomes number 3, we really are talking about, again, defining and explaining, defining and discussing, differentiating, compare and contrast kinds of activity, business concepts, using business tools, existing information. All of those are preconditions to doing program outcomes number 2. You have to have that as sort of foundational to doing the higher level program outcomes number 2. They can be a little bit confusing at times when you can have a word like analyze but you have to read the context of the entire outcome statement. So let's contrast, let's just walk through the communication objectives through all 3, and maybe that might help provide some clarity on this as well. So for program outcomes number 1, we're asking our students to write and present error-free arguments for an internal business audience, maybe for my own marketing department or my own accounting department, sort of narrow set of an audience. If you go down to number 6, program outcome number 3, number 6, we're asking them to communicate too, but we're asking them to write and present supported business arguments and/or technical issues or processes with internal audiences of a business organization. So now the audience is bigger, but it's still internal to the company, and we're asking them to write business arguments and address technical issues, right? So, but it's a little bigger. But then in program outcomes number 2, we're asking them to create and communicate sustained, coherent arguments in 2 or more media to both internal and external audiences of a business organization. You see, higher order, broader, more complex expectation, right, in terms of the methods and modalities they would employ. Hopefully that gives you some sense of the differentiation. But when we go in, we want to look at programs and to see their sequencing across degree levels, and even within the structure of a curriculum, if there is a consistent prerequisite architecture to a program. What do I mean by that? I can't ask a student to take a class in quality control. Let me walk with you here for a moment. Quality control. Let's say that I have a company that bakes bread. And in order to bake bread, I need to make the dough. And I put it in whatever other ingredients that go into it. I put it in an oven. When I put it in that oven, if I'm mass producing bread, I have to have some tolerance levels. The heat has to be between some degree temperature and another temperature. And it has to be in that oven for so long in order for it to cook. Right? If I cook it too long, it'll burn. If I cook it at the wrong temperature, at a higher temperature, in the same amount of time, it'll burn. Same is true if I undercook it. Right? So there's some tolerance levels. I say this to you because in this activity requires my knowledge of some statistics in order to understand variation of temperature and its impact on this bread. So it may be incumbent upon me to have a statistics class that precedes the course in quality control. You follow me? If the students take the statistics class after, or if it's scheduled after they take the quality control, it's less likely that the students will be successful in the quality control course. It's just less likely. In fact, it's almost impossible because they have to do the math and understand the variation calculated for a population of loaves of bread. in order for that to work well. Question or comment?
Please, what decides these outcomes? And who decides them? What are the basis, the standards for deciding these outcomes? And who does this? Yes.
I think this is a simple question. Remember what we said. Who has oversight of the quality system? Who has oversight? Who determines the outcomes ultimately? The faculty. You do. It's me and you. We determine the outcomes. We get inputs from a lot of sources.
What is the guarantee that we are on the right track according to mission and efficiency?
So we have the mission. We talked about the prospect of looking at other institutions and what they've written for similar programs. We could check that. I told you that I had a faculty member who did that recently. She said, I'm looking at 7 different schools that have good population of learners. They're leading programs. These are their outcomes. These are the ones I'm choosing for our program. There's some overlap. Maybe there's a signature outcome or two. There's the institution and its expectation for graduates. So maybe I have to embed, maybe the institution has a commitment to understanding, knowledge of diverse peoples and the human condition. So I want to make sure in my program we add that outcome to it as well, because it's unique and distinctive to our institution. Maybe the kingdom has a particular outcome that they want for all graduates of universities within the kingdom. That might feed into programs or program level. So you have to decide based on the variety of inputs what your outcomes are. It's ultimately a faculty responsibility to determine what those outcomes are. But they have to stand the test of peer review, which means you should say, here's how I arrived at these outcomes. I just didn't wake up one morning and bam, come up with my own outcomes. I had sources of information I used. I talked with colleagues, the profession, other sources, and then we determine which outcomes. Does that answer your question?
The question is, if we check the outcomes of a particular degree in a particular major in all the American universities, are they the same? And if there are differences, are these differences major or minor? This is the thing.
All of our American institutions aren't the same. We established that fact from day one. I said to you that part of the strength that I perceive of American higher education is its diversity. You have religious institutions. You have Native American institutions, historically black colleges, women's colleges, comprehensive research 1 institutions, 4-year schools, technical vocational schools, community colleges, etc., and pipelines between them. So, because those missions are different, they tend to be reflected in the program outcomes as well, right? I mean, they can help with some of that just seep right in. My institution has a very pragmatic focus. We believe in learning outcomes that are relevant to the world, and we want to prepare students to make change in the world. So relevance is a big deal for us. So we're investing in resources in advisory boards. We're making sure that the faculty development is about currency of knowledge relative to what they're learning. It's just a function of our mission that carries all the way through to the program objectives. So the programs are, the objectives there are very pragmatic. You know, they're professionally oriented. They're, you know, how do you apply what you've learned in practice is such fundamental to our work. That drives how then we assess learners. I can't assess on a test, on a written test, the outcome, design and execute a solution for problems using a multifunctional business approach that is socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable. There's no way that I can put that on a test and demonstrate that students are able to do that. That means this outcome implies there's got to be a project involved here that's going to enable them to do that work. So there's a burden on our institution to have assessment aligned with that outcome. As it's not inexpensive. It's going to require effort on the part of faculty to review those projects, or to have students review it, or external review of the project by business leaders. But that's a function of our mission. Your mission might be very different. Your mission talks about scholarship and research, has it in there. So then, in that case, I would be looking for, perhaps instead of, design and execute a solution, research a project, or research solutions that have been implemented to do this, or, you know what I mean? It's a different orientation, and that's fine. That's fine. But you have to stand up against your program bodies, your program accrediting bodies. They may say that they want to have both research and practice as it relates to business disciplines, right? It depends. There are sources of information, but ultimately, as a faculty, you have to come to some consensus on the outcomes for your respective programs. And to be able to show the rationale you employ to determine that.
Taking forward the question of our colleague, what about the program outcomes of our technical programs, computer science bachelor's degree program, and the course outcomes like introduction to programming course? Will they be the same across the board, or they might be different, like in Saudi Arabia, different US?
That's a great question. So, what we've seen in Ohio for introductory courses is that they're typically about 85 to 95% overlap in foundation courses in a field. That is, you have standard textbooks that are popular, that most universities use for certain subjects. And we expect an introduction to computer science or principles of computer science course to be pretty much consistent wherever you take it, right? But once you get into higher order courses, what you find at universities is that they often establish more signature courses associated with the expertise of the faculty. You see that a lot in higher level courses. But at the foundation courses, introductory courses, they tend to be very similar across institutions. This was one of the major debates that took place in my state about 2004, 2005. It's that you had faculty members saying, my introduction to English course is the absolute best introduction to English course in the world, and I cannot accept another introduction to English course as a transfer course in my program. Well, this goes back to the first slide. I'm going to tell you, mediocrity happens, right? And sometimes it happens, people who are claiming that, I've not been to an institution where people did not make the claim that their course is the absolute best course on that subject. So, but when you look at and compare the outcomes of the courses, and we did this across many, many courses in Ohio, as a process of allowing for students to transfer between Ohio institutions. It started for us. And it evolved into, this past year, 2014, into what we call state reciprocity. So now your course can go to other states. And I think that we've had 27 states sign on right away to this reciprocity agreement. Basically on these first 2-year courses. Generally they're the same across most institutions. And then when you get into higher order courses, they start to differentiate more. So I hope that answers your question. Typically we see similarities in those survey courses.
So I think benchmarking is an important item for integration and development of the curriculum. Benchmarking. This means benchmarking recommended for preparation and development of because most of courses may be overlapped, especially in basic courses. Applicable course or advanced course may be little change according to your program outcomes, according to the environment need.
Well, I think it's a good practice to benchmark anyway. I think it creates some efficiency in curriculum development too. if why reinvent the wheel if you've seen already, some folks have already done it. You can incorporate, outcomes, you can incorporate some of the best practices. You can even, go further and, improve upon that. And that, that's, certainly acceptable to say my student experience is going to be even better than what I've experienced or researched. But, it's a good starting place to have a sense of what other people are doing and how you describe their courses. I think learners seek that mobility to be able to say you can transfer this course into another university. Or our universities can partner. I mean, think about it. What if you wanted your students to do a year at my university? And we determine that if students complete 40 credit hours at my university, they can get my degree and yours. Would that be a value added to the students? What enables that is some comparability of those learning outcomes in the courses, particularly the early courses. That I can say, we can accept those courses into our program of study. Right? And these 40 hours are likely going to be higher level, probably more distinctive and more unique. And we can confer 2 degrees.
نحن بحاجة الآن، أولا أعيد كلامنا، نشكر لسعادتكم هذا الطرح، ولكن نحن في جامعتنا حتى نتكلم عن المخرجات نود أن نكون دراستنا واقعية في جامعة بارعة، يعني الجامعة الأمريكية متقدمة ونحوها، نحن جامعة ناشئة. أنا أخشى أن بعد هذه الدورة إذا أردنا أن نعمل في المجال أو الجودة الأكاديمية نصدم ببعض العقبات في الواقع، أو البنية التحتية أو نحوها. فهذا يتعارض مع المخرجات أو مع بناء الأستاذ الأكاديمي أو بناء الطالب الجامعي. الشاهد أننا نريد أن شيء يعني من مجال الواقع من بيئتنا حتى يكون لدينا ممارسة فعلية واقعية. طيب.
Okay, hold on a second. We have our microphone went off, so we have our microphone back up. We had one of our participants in this room was making a comment. I'm going to ask one of my colleagues to interpret it, so for all of our benefit.
His point is, let me briefly state it in a single statement, is that at a later stage, his main concern is that if he wants to apply all these concepts about accreditation to reality here, there might be like problems in applying it. All right, like differences in professors' levels, curriculum design, etc. So that was his specific one.
I think we would like to say we may need self-assessment to know the difficulties.
I'm going to need batteries. I don't have any more up here. We're working on getting our batteries fixed. Hold on.
getting batteries.
Testing, testing. We're broadcasting live again. I'm sorry that we went out there for a bit. We were talking about the challenges of implementing all of these processes if we follow them this way. There is a cost to this. There are people who probably don't see this as fundamental to their responsibility. But there's a greater cost to not doing it if your expectation is to participate in the international higher education community. Because we expect, I cannot engage in that activity that we discussed earlier if the program or the institution isn't accredited. It makes it very difficult. It makes it difficult, if not impossible, for us to come up with an articulation agreement around programs and mobility of learners, etc. And I think it goes a long way in terms of supporting the reputation of the institution and its faculty to know that you're engaged in programs that are accredited. So this is, but there is work that's part of this. Is it reasonable to expect that it can be done? Yes, because there are a lot of schools that are getting it done. It's happening now. We've gone through, we have regular relations with my institution with accrediting bodies. We have to get 62 authorizations. We get authorizations from ministries of education outside of the country. We have program-specific accreditations for some of our programs, not all, and then our institution's accredited. So it can be done. It does take work, and there is some logic behind this. And we're working through that logic together now. We're working through it. But I think, so that's sort of my thoughts about it. Yes, it is. It takes work, but it can be done. Many institutions are getting it done. See, where are we? I don't mean to lecture or preach too much about that, but I do think I think there's tremendous value in doing this work. And so you have on the second page. Some of you have a 2-page handout there. This is, I wanted to show you what some of the kinds of things I encounter when I'm out and about with this accrediting work, doing this accreditation work. At the top of the page is the expression of the course by one institution. It's a strategic management course. And instead of expressing learning outcomes, they just list subjects. Right? There aren't really clear, identified learner goals. They're just topics that are listed. And this is not bad if it links to learning outcomes. But right here, from the standpoint of what we're expecting our learners to be able to do, it doesn't really indicate that. So this would be something that the accrediting bodies would say, this is not a good practice. To express the learner goals would be a better practice, just so you have a sense of that. The one below it talks about the MBA course designed to prepare students to be senior managers. All of this is fine. And the course will introduce students to some basic concepts. Doesn't really talk about what the learner does. It talks about what the professor is going to do. It will introduce you to some concepts. So this is another thing that we would look at sort of critically, say, well, what are you expecting of the learners? This is a shift from a faculty-centric approach to the learner-centric approach. How do you focus on your learner, address your learner's needs, because ultimately the measure of success is whether the student learns. So starting with outcomes that have that perspective is really important. So those are just some examples of alternative ways that I've experienced courses presented. And again, since 2005, the emphasis has been on student learning
learning outcomes. Right? What do they get out of it? And that's the currency today in American higher education that enables mobility of courses in comparison of courses, not just topics. It's the learning outcomes. Let me stop and ask you if you have any questions or comments about this. Yes, sir.
In your handout, please, the second page, here, the two program outcomes. The first one seems to be just like topics to be discussed.
Yes.
So this is part of the syllabus, right? It does not state what the students should learn. What I know about outcomes is that what do you, as a teacher, expect from the student to learn once the course is completed successfully? So the first one does not meet this requirement. The second one seems to be more or like objectives, plus what the teacher will do. So it's irrelevant, I think. I believe outcomes should state clearly what should the student learn from the course in relation to the mission of the department, the college, and the university. So none of these two stated points fit in what we need to see as outcomes for a course or a program. Yes, thank you.
We're in agreement. So this is, it's not to say you couldn't do this. You can do this if you express the learning outcomes first. And if you have some way of saying, on week one, we're going to cover these topics, but then there are these assignments that link the topics and the learning outcomes, right? Because we're going to talk about this when we get later into the week, that you can take a learning outcome at the program level and cascade it down to the course outcomes, which cascade down to activity outcomes, which might include the discussion of subjects and topics, but it also might include some form of activity that the learners engaged in. I'm fully in agreement with you. These are insufficient from an accreditation standpoint. And, well, it could be relevant, but from the standpoint of being learner-centered, it misses the point. Both of them. You may want to, again, the assurance question here would be, how have we expressed our outcomes, our learning outcomes at the program level for our students in our programs? That would be the assurance question. Advancement discussion for us might be, if we have expressed them in these ways, how might we express them as learning outcomes for students? How might we improve our descriptions of our materials, instructional materials, our courses and programs to reflect student learning outcomes? So this is a sort of resource for you, just for that comparison and contrast. So we have this idea that degree programs should be appropriate to higher education. And we're going through and we're talking about the different ways that we can do that to ensure that our outcomes are written at a certain level, that they are distinguished between other programs and distinguished by levels, right, within a field. The other thing that we have to ensure is that for any given program of study, we are requiring that the student, that their level of performance is appropriate to the degree level. And so I thought we might, I've sort of given you some answers to this, but I thought we might play around with this a bit. As you know, based on what we've examined with the 3 sets of outcomes, that the outcome verbs are important, that they represent a hierarchy of level of complexity and relative to the expectations we have of our learners, right? So define is at a basic level. Define a concept. But analyze a concept may be at a different level of complexity. And design a solution based on your analysis might be at a whole nother level of complexity. And so let's take a program. How about a Bachelor of Science in Medicine?
Bachelor of Science in Medicine. What sort of performance might you expect of students who are obtaining a Bachelor of Science in Medicine? Now, this might be a challenge for some of you. I'll give you two. You can choose one or the other. So, Bachelor of Science in Medicine. How about a Master of Arts in Educational Counseling? Now we have two different ones. You can pick one at your table. You either have a Bachelor of Science in Medicine, and the question is, what level of performance would you expect from students in that program? And then the other one is a Master of Arts in Educational Counseling. What level of performance would you expect from students in a Master's of Arts in Educational Counseling? Pick one, and let's hear about their level of performance that you would expect. Thank you. You would expect them to be able to what? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking about two different programs and the level of performance we would require of students in the respective programs. And it's, from my account, it's moving you to think about the outcomes of these particular programs, right? And the process you're engaged in is the actual process you would engage in if you're doing this work. It's having conversations in the faculty about whether we review outcomes or whether we come to express them for the first time. But what do we expect from our learners, their level of performance in our programs, right? And I'm curious to hear what you came up with for some of these programs, because This, I should say to you this, that some things are not filling out forms. Some things are, we had a qualitative conversation about it. We documented our conversation in our rationale, and we can communicate that to other people, right? That would be the evidence, the example of evidence of your attention to quality of learning outcomes. Is that we had the conversation, we discussed various inputs. It was among our faculty that this conversation took place. We came to some general consensus around the learning outcomes and what we expect our learners to know and be able to do. Okay, so let me hear from you what you came up with. This is a method. It's a method that you've just engaged in. So let's start here. Tell us the program you selected and what you discussed.
Okay, we discussed medical program, and we said that by the end of this program, the student should be able first to, this is just a random,
okay,
apply the relevant basic sciences to clinical sciences, take appropriate history from the patient, perform physical examination of the patient, investigate the patient in an appropriate way, diagnose the patient, outline the medical plan for the patient, to be able to communicate with the patient, to be able to demonstrate an ethical approach to the patient, to be able to perform certain practical procedures, should be able to retrieve an appropriate information for that particular patient. So this is just.
So there's a lot of different outcomes there, but if I'm looking at what the standards are for degree programs across higher education, I think you've satisfied most of it. That any profession has an ethical component to it. That we're expecting your students to collect, analyze, and communicate information. I think you covered that. The diversity of the human condition, working with patients, patient care, and doing that in an appropriate way might be something that satisfies that criteria. I mean, as you described this, it's sort of, you've gone down and covered broadly the basis. But what you would want to do is come to consensus as a group on what these outcomes are. And typically, outcomes are expressed in a way that you may have somewhere around the neighborhood of 7. You probably have 9 or 10 there?
Yes.
Yeah. That may be a bit much, because if you have the outcomes expressed, you have to assess them. That's the other thing. That's not to put a parameter on it. You could do 10, but I also want to make you aware that if you express the outcome, you have to assess it. And some of them are sort of aggregated up to a larger outcome, which I saw that actually in a few different situations. It's sort of a capstone outcome that requires knowledge of the other ones that you can use as a principal basis for your assessment activity. Others want to offer thoughts on this subject, in addition to what was just mentioned. Okay, let's go here.
Yes, here we go. I'll do that.
Thanks, Ed.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ما أتوقعه من الطالب الخريج في الطب البشري أن يكون قادر على القدرة على الحصول على المعلومة عن المشكلة من المريض. 2. القدرة عن استخدام هذه المعلومات لتشخيص المشكلة. 3. القدرة على الاستنتاج واتخاذ القرار المبني على استقراء للبيانات والقراءات والتحاليل. 4. استخدام طرق العلاج ووسائله وأدواته.
Very good. So if you gentlemen were in the same program, you need to come to some consensus on what outcomes you want to express as a group, right? If you were in the same program, the Bachelor of Science in Medicine, you would have to come to some agreement on which ones you would select
that best represent your intentions for your learners. So that would be the social process you'd be engaged in. So it can be done. You know, it takes a process of sitting down and working together through this process. Maybe periodic review of learning outcomes in your program based on your assessment findings, and maybe as expertise changes in the college, you might even look at the outcomes periodically in that way. And then the other sort of obligation that you have is to communicate this to the public. So I brought a couple websites. So here's one of my websites that talks about the Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration, and it has students can access the course descriptions. They can view the curriculum for the programs, and here it expresses the program outcomes. And if you remember, these are the same outcomes that were on that sheet. This is for the bachelor's degree. Right. Similar majors are listed. Related minors, but it's publicly available. And then that's the program details. There's a program overview that describes in more of a narrative form what the program is all about, the major curriculum focus areas, the career opportunities that are available for people who have this major, the employment outlook for the major. For each major, there's a description of this, so that it gives, again, I have to put context here. For our majors, we have to demonstrate relevance to professional practice and to opportunity. And we should have to illustrate that. It's part of our mission, and it flows down through how we communicate this to students. This is not everyone's obligation, but it is ours. And it's one way we demonstrate that relationship between the programs and the marketplace. So, and in any one of these you click on, you can view salary trends that come from the government data for each of these particular roles. So it gives a student a sense of, here are the kind of career opportunities you would be available to you if you study this program at the bachelor's level. And I would imagine that would differ for the MBA degree. But again, professional and organizations and associations you may be involved in, because we want our master's students to be involved in professional organizations and associations. And the program outcomes are the ones that were on the list. They're different from the bachelor's degree outcomes. Meet your faculty, program overview. Same thing. So each of the programs has a sense of the kind of roles you're likely to start into, the curriculum focus, employment outlook. Oh, here's an interesting thing. So there's so for our purposes, we describe that we use academic and industry experts, and so that this area down here changes when you click on that. So relevant and consistent curriculum, what do we mean by that? Hands-on learning experiences, what do we mean by that? And then the kind of faculty members who will teach the program. This particular program values people with industry experience as well as the doctoral credentials. And so that philosophy is sort of made explicit on the website. But it all starts with the learning outcomes, program learning outcomes. That everything is driven from the program learning outcomes. The requirements of the faculty, the kind of learning experiences we're going to design for our students, the expectations that they connect with the world, all of that is sort of driven by the program outcomes. One other point I will make here is right before break, is that in the United States, there's something called the Degree Qualifications Profile for American higher education. They initiated it as a project, we tested it, and then rolled it out to American higher education institutions. And what this does is prescribes certain kinds of learning outcomes, expectations for degree level. Right? So a bachelor's degree student should know and be able to do these kinds of things. Master's degree students should know and be able to do higher order thinking kinds of abilities. All of that sort of well documented in this paper for us, and we rely on this as a source of input for for developing our program outcomes. In Europe, they have something very similar. It was developed through that Bologna process, and they came up with a similar kind of document, which pretty much the lines are very similar to this Lumina report. But it also facilitated a greater amount of mobility throughout Europe for students who could then transfer from one institution to another and take their learning with them. They didn't have to leave that behind. So this is one of the benefits of accreditation, is you can have a sort of a basic understanding of the quality of the institution. Now the point was made. I want to be honest here. Does that mean that every student who comes through the program that you have that's accredited is going to be of high quality? Maybe not. All right, of course, it's wishful thinking. It's also true that people go to the greatest institutions in the world and are slackers there and don't do that well. And you could have a person at a pretty average institution that excels beyond belief. It's also true. But what we have through this process is generally accepted practice. And we would say, on average, your population of learners are going through a quality program that's endorsed by your peers. That's what we are able to say with this process. Right? Without it, it's hard for us to make that conclusion. With it, we can conclude. And then it's on the burden is on the student then. Right? How we evaluate students is very different from how we evaluate programs, institutions, and courses. To evaluate students, whether they're qualified to do something, we got to interview them, we got to see their work background, we got to see their transcripts. We look at a lot of things to make that judgment on individuals. But what we're talking about here is what we do to provide quality in a quality institution that provides quality programs to a population of learners. That's what we're really talking about here. With that said, are there any questions from the women? Are there any questions from the women? Any questions related to what we've covered? Any questions from the men? No? Let us take a break. Prayer time. Thank you.
So do you have say programming instruction design?
So let me show you. Oh, you had no prayer, right?
It's fine. I'll show you the list of problems.
So,
how much it costs me if you want to go?
let me see if I can pull that up for you too. So, let's go to read programs. Science technology, Master of Instruction Design and Performance Technology. I'll let you look. You can scroll down using this thing here.
Okay.
This is a really great program that we offer. And we really service people who are busy adults. Work full time.
And it's online.
Yes. Some of the content area focus: instructional systems design, education technology, e-learning development, content development, performance improvement.
Maybe.
E-learning development. It's classroom solutions.
Who did this design to you?
My web team.
Web team. Very elegant.
Thank you. And this is our learning difference. Industry experts, relevant, consistent curriculum, hands-on learning. This is consistent for us.
Does it require me to go for any time?
No.
Not at all.
You don't have to. If you wanted to, you could. You don't have to. Not at all. And instructional design, coordinator, performance consultant. These are some of the kinds of things you can do. Program details. Course descriptions. These are the classes. Learning theory, instructional design, performance analysis.
Actually, my master in medical education was designing study guides for tropical medicine, which is being used now in Sudan as a reference in tropical diseases. That would be a really good information. I mean, how it will help me in my career in the future. I mean, I will have a look at it and tomorrow we'll discuss it more.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, play around on there and
Okay.
check it out.
Okay.
But if you're talking about, depends on what your goals are. Goes back to your goals.
Absolutely.
Because your goals match the outcomes of this program. That's the whole point of how we express this. And this program is really designed for people who want cutting edge instruction. And they want to understand performance, what the results are, so they can express outcomes, and then how do I best design experiences to get there. And that could be in a variety of fields. You already have an expertise area, so you'd be combining with your area of expertise. And I would say that I would put this up again. I would say your education with a degree in this area could go up against anybody who has a doctorate in medical education. I would think, because you already have an expertise in medicine. This would give you use of all the contemporary approaches, tools, methods, and really framing outcome expectancies in a very different way.
I will have a look at it today.
Yeah.
Fine.
Okay, great, very good.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
We already did this.
Okay. This is about standards.
We talked about standards, but we pretty much did this already.
We have done it.
Mhm.
This activity you mean, huh?
Yep.
Okay.
We done it.
And then? Cascading?
I'm going to show them that the degree standards are online. The standards that I'm talking about, these here, they're online. So I have a link to the page. And then we start talking about the cascading nature of the outcomes.
But Chris, we have covered this. Just focus on this.
I'm gonna just briefly review this. I always start where I finished and move forward.
Okay.
So I've got
And here, program outcomes should be consistent wherever they are offered.
That's right. And we talked about that.
Regardless, yeah.
But to say that these outcomes are central, here's a model that you can use to
You
show.
will refer to these standards concerning nursing education, or
Just an example.
Okay.
Actually,
This is about what?
nursing standards show how it's reflected here.
How they are reflected on your website?
Yeah. So we talk about programming the
Accredited, overview and details, and why choose Franklin?
I'll just focus on the accredited nature of the program. And,
You will focus on this?
yeah.
Okay, with the example. To show what? To show what? How
all this fits together.
Okay. And then the cascading?
Cascading. We'll get into that today.
Yeah, haven't.
No, I haven't talked about this yet.
Yeah.
Not in this class.
Yeah. And then program outcomes?
So let's identify. So here's their activity. What would be the sample program? What faculty requirements would you require?
This is an activity? To do with what? Identify sources of input for BSc in energy. We start with this, right? The input for...
You and I did this morning before they came in.
Yeah.
We went through all this, but they have not yet.
Okay. Can you remind me?
Yeah, so we're going to identify the sources of input for a
Curriculum
Bachelor of
design?
Science in Energy, sources of input for outcomes.
Program outcomes.
For a BS in Energy Management program.
Okay.
What would be the sample program outcomes? And what faculty requirements, qualifications are required for that?
Combine them in one. Just make it one. Okay. And then?
And then I'm going to talk about how you can map program outcomes through your courses, which we won't talk about courses too much today, but I'm going to talk about how you map the program outcomes to the course outcomes. And I'm going to show them a couple of examples of that.
What are these couple of examples?
A couple of examples?
Yes. You will show them a couple of examples?
Yes.
Which are?
Program outcomes. Those are the courses.
Okay. The table you are talking about.
Yes.
Program learning outcomes. Bachelor of Science, Healthcare Management.
Yes.
This is bachelor? Bachelor, huh?
Yes. Does your screen show you this? Any other?
I don't have anything actually. I'm just listening to you, listening. That's why I'm coming here. I want you to discuss with me these. Okay? But if you are going to go through them on a fly, it's better.
I'll just, what I'm going to do is describe this table. Program outcomes related to K courses. And there are three letters. One is introduce, reinforce, and assess.
Okay.
And I'm going to talk about
At the concept level.
at the outcome level.
Of the outcome level.
Outcome is introduced, outcome is reinforced, and now the outcome is assessed. Where is assessment appropriate?
Where?
Those are the outcomes. They correspond with these numbers right here.
Evaluate safety vigilance of regulatory outcomes. I and R. I refers to
Introduce.
okay? Reinforce.
And assess.
Reintroduce the reinforce and assess. Okay? And the outcome is
Exactly.